Matter for the Greeks essentially meant indeterminacy. It was formlessness in contrast to form. And if you want to learn more about that, then that's something I've talked about endlessly on this channel. But for now, I want to come back to this physical traditionalism because it's traditional in the sense that it is the dominant way of understanding physicality within the scientific tradition of modernity. Within the pre-modernist, pre-nominalist understanding of the world, pre-modernist perception of reality, you have the presumption, for lack of a better term, that forms, ideas, patterns actually exist in the world, that they are actually given in experience in the same way that we modernists would presume the physical properties of an object to be given in experience rather than supplied by the human mind. So, for example, if I look at a cup, I, a modernist, am going to think that the idea of cup is something that I am bringing into the picture, that I am supplying to the experience, that cupness is not an actual thing that's out there in the world. It's a category or idea that I am bringing into the perception of the cup, right? When I look at a tree, likewise, I might say that the world doesn't know that the tree is a tree because tree is a human contrivance. It is a category that we have invented that I am then projecting onto the world as my mind kind of categorizes the things in reality. Whereas, in contrast, a pre-modern person, such as Aristotle or Plato, for example, would say that the treeness is a form, it is a pattern that is actually there in the world, right? And so the thought of tree is actually not something that my mind is supplying to that experience of the tree, but rather something that is actually given by the tree. Now, it might initially seem that this is just a semantic debacle, but this is actually extremely consequential for all kinds of reasons. Because really what this amounts to is the idea within the pre-modern world that psyche actually exists in the world, that it's actually out there in the world, and this is why we don't really see a hard divide between consciousness and matter in the pre-modern world in the way that we'll see it after the Renaissance and the scientific revolution. And this is really going to begin with the nominalists, when the nominalists say that ideas do not actually exist in the world, that they are categories invented by human beings, and that ideas don't exist independently of mind. This is something that has really worked its way into the most basic assumptions, the most basic foundations of the way that we modern people perceive reality, the way that we think about absolutely everything. If you asked a person, anybody, what are you? If they understand that question at all, then they're going to probably answer with something like, well, I am my consciousness, right? And we all kind of intuitively understand what that means. When the person says, I am my consciousness, they're saying, well, I am this field, as it were, of potential experience. I am not the experiences themselves, but rather the experiencer, right? And this is something that you really just do not see in the ancient world. You don't really see a notion of consciousness in that sense of a subjective receptivity to experience, right? You have the notion of psyche, but psyche is understood to mean forms. Psyche consists of the forms which are the shapers of the world around us. But within the pre-modern world, what you don't have is a separation of the concepts of existence on the one hand and consciousness on the other. And so those two notions are essentially the same. They're woven together, and so there's not really a separation there that would be needed for understanding consciousness as something independent of reality in general. And so you don't have a notion of inanimate matter in the way that you will see later on after the Nominalist movement and then the Renaissance. So what you have here is a transition from a pre-modern world in which psyche, thought, and consciousness are really considered to pervade reality itself to a modern world in which we think of those things as special cases, things that only happen under specific circumstances, and that the default state of being, of existence, is that of inanimate, inert, unconscious matter. So this is going to then lay the foundations for what will eventually become modern science. If you are a pre-modern person who sees forms and ideas as actually things in the world, then the process of natural investigation, of explanation, is going to be one where you are trying to disclose the forms and patterns that are actually out there in the world, because those forms are understood to be causally primary, to be the things that actually shape the world. But if you are a post-nominalist, modernist thinker, and you see forms, ideas, categories as things that we are bringing into the picture, that we are creating, then the process of explanation starts to look like something completely different. It starts to look like a process whereby we are telling a story about how bodies are being pushed around by other bodies. You can see here that there's already an implicit transition that is happening here when we internalize form, internalize thought, whereby causation comes to be reconceptualized, whereby bodily causation is understood to be equivalent to causation itself. Formal and final causation, psychical causation are erased from that picture of reality. You've got a kind of full-blown atheistic materialism in which all of reality can be conceptualized as consisting of physical bodies. Nominalism at this point has become really an unspoken given of the way that people are conceptualizing reality. There has been this internalization of form and idea and psyche, such that the world is seen as consisting primarily of material and efficient causation, but no formal or final causality. So within that worldview, it makes perfect sense to think that any kind of explanation of any kind of macroscopic natural phenomena is going to be in terms of physical causality, interactions between bodies. But that notion of materiality as formlessness is really crucial here, because it indicates a world in which the causation is not simply bottom up. It can also be top down, as it were. Animacy, aliveness, psyche is able to actually shape the world, shape bodies, and shape the way that those bodies move around and interact with one another. And it's actually only in specific circumstances that you have solid, inert, dead objects that behave in this perfectly predictable, mathematically quantifiable sort of way that physics has taken to be the golden standard of bodily existence in general. If we reanimate the world, or rather reanimate the world as we conceive it, then we can begin to understand the world in a very different way, a way in which we can actually look to our own baseline empirical experience of being in the world and start to see that the world beyond us operates in a very similar manner, that the volition that we experience in moving our own bodies around is actually out there, not just in other plants and animals, but in the world in general, that we live in an animate universe.